Kitman Cheung as the Chief Technology Officer of IBM ASEAN to give a keynote speech. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kitman Cheung.
Thank you. That's the extent of my bahasa. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kitman Cheung. I'm CTO for IBM ASEAN. Now, today, I'm going to spend a little bit of time. We need to call up the presentation. I'm actually moving other things forward. Let me just go back. Oh, here we go. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about AI ethics, but more importantly, AI governance. So, let me begin. A little technical. Here we go. So, why is AI governance important? Raymond has been talking a lot about AI adoption. We're picking up speed. This is probably the fastest innovation cycle, hype cycle I've ever seen in my 25-odd years of working experience in IT. Generative AI, ChatGPT, any kind of large language models, that is moving faster than any other technology hype cycle. You know, the curve where everything gets hyped up, despair comes along, and then steady state productivities. We're moving very fast. However, as we're going through this, one of the key things we got to realize that customers are struggling with and client and enterprises are struggling with is the concept of governance. More than 60% of executives doesn't think that they're actually ready for AI regulations that are upcoming. More than 72% of the executives says, we're going to hold back on generative AI because we're not sure if we can govern it effectively. Why generative AI though? We've been using AI for a very long time. Why is generative AI particularly tricky? Well, one, it is very tricky because it's very convincing and it actually sounds like how everyone imagined AI should be. It sounds like Jarvis from the Avenger movies. It sounds exactly like that when you interact with generative AI. It means that people who aren't necessarily understanding the math and the technology behind it will believe what it says because it sounds very convincing. It's coming from a computer. Second part of the danger is that generative AI is by no means deterministic. It's by chance, quite often, what it will do. That's the hidden danger here. Because it's actually, the reality is these models don't actually understand what it is that they're talking about. It's just probabilistic matching of word patterns, linguistic patterns. Become particularly dangerous if you don't put governance around it. Machine learning models in the past, much easier. Right? We do a random forest, we can explain the math. We do any kind of regression analysis, we can explain the math. Here, neural network, we cannot explain what's going on and what is thinking. That's why it's particularly dangerous in adoption. Now, EU Act and different regulations are inbound, and it's coming fast. They're coming across the board. We are tracking all of these because in all of these jurisdictions, we actually have offices that actually have to abide by everything that's going on there. And our AI ethics office and our regulation office are actually tracking so that we can help our customer adjust. IBM is in a really good place to help with that because we actually have to adjust our practices in all these locations. Now I'm going to run through it really quickly. There are key things here that IBM truly believe in terms of policy setting. Number one, it's about balancing innovation with responsibility, trust, and creating AI. What that means for us is that we should regulate AI risk, not algorithm. There's a lot of large language models producer out there that says we should regulate models. We should not let other people build more models. That's not the way that we think this should go. Because innovation has to come. And it's not the model that's the problem. It's how you choose to use it and what governance you put around it that creates the risk. So governance is all about managing that risk. And that's why a lot of what we're doing is centered around risk mitigation and risk analysis. Big AI creator and deployer be accountable. That's not our standpoint. That's actually all the government policymakers are saying the same thing. If you're going to use AI, you have to be responsible for it. Makes governance that much more important. And we need to support open AI innovation. This is a very interesting point for us at IBM. Everyone used to think that IBM is a closed source company, right? We build proprietary software. But our AI strategy is completely open in the sense that we want to support the open ecosystem. I think in the long term, there isn't going to be a proprietary algorithm that's going to win out. Just like today, we go to GitHub and download Python libraries to do machine learning. Very near future, you go to GitHub, you go to Hugging Face and download a LLM that you can use under open source license. And you're going to solve problems using that. Right? The old days of just buying from a single provider, that's long gone. So these are some of the things that we believe in, but it does create governance problems for us, right? So because open source and all those things. Now, why regulation? I'm going to take a break from talking about technology stuff and do something in pop culture. I usually find that wakes people up. Anyone subscribe to Netflix here? Netflix? 1, 2, 3 people? That's got to be more than that. Have anyone seen this movie? It's from 2018. It's a documentary. 3 Identical Strangers. It has nothing to do with AI, by the way. What I really want to talk about is unintended consequences ahead. That's the tagline that I put in. I borrowed this poster from Netflix, I apologize, but this is publicly available. I'm just, I'm attributing this to Netflix as their poster. I did add this little sign to it though. What does that mean? Well, in the stories, it talks about these 3 identical triplets separated at birth. And they met each other by chance when they were 18, 19 years old. And it talks about how their lives evolved because of their experiences. However, as the documentary moves on, in the back end, it turns out that they were separated at birth on purpose by a renowned psychiatrist that wanted to do a study about nature versus nurture. Wants to understand how that works to help people, to help advance the science of psychiatry. And it turns out that they weren't the only identical triplets. All these identical twins is being done to the same thing is being done to them by an adoption agency. Separated at birth, not knowing that they actually have any sibling, put into different families. These triplets, one was in a blue-collar family, one in a middle-class white-collar family, one in an affluent family, to study. Now, problem is, it all sounded good when you talk about, we're going to learn about nature versus nurture, we're going to do all these great things to advance science, but the consequences is completely opposite. Ruined the lives of 3 people. One of them committed suicide, unfortunately. So, why am I bringing this up? It's because regulation that we're creating today that governs AI is not about cybercriminals. Cybercriminals don't care about European AI Act. They'll do what they do because that's what they do. They break the law on purpose. Regulation's there to help company governs what they are allowed to do and what they're not, and help guide them to prevent unintended things from happening. You'll be surprised how many of these examples that I run across. I talk to medical professions, HR professionals, legal professionals. The things that they want to do sounds amazing until you sit down and take a look at it from multiple angles. You realize maybe you should take a step back. So that's what governance is actually important. That's why you need to build in to your system the ability to collaborate, the ability to educate, and that's what we really try to do. Now, I already talked about the risk of generative AI, and I know I'm using a lot of time. It tends to take a long time to get to my stories, but we know that with generative AI, there are new risks. We also know that it amplifies some of the existing risks. As I said, people tend to believe generative AI more. People are convinced of non-deterministic outcome that is the fact, and they're not. Biases can come in, hateful speeches can come in, different things can come in that's completely unintended. We've seen that with image generation, we've seen that with text generation, they're all high profile. All the risks are very true. So we have to balance between innovation and trust and responsibilities. So to do that, we really need to start understanding what makes a trustworthy platform for AI deployment. These are some of the things that we need to understand. How is the model trained? Can it detect any biases and unfairness? Is it transparent? Transparency is different from explainability. You can have transparency by letting everyone knows what model you use, what data you used to train that model, what fine-tuning you did, who built it, and how do you deploy it, and what source material that you use in your RAG use case. You can be transparent. even though you may not be explainable. That's kind of where the neural network piece comes in. But you need to be transparent. Does it comply with regulation? Is it safe to use? And of course, can it be easily customized? And these are things that makes an effective and trustworthy AI platform. And that's some of the truth behind what we've been saying. This is what IBM actually have observed through all our engagement from an international basis of executives and so forth. Number one, we are going to be in a multi-model world. In fact, smaller large language model seems to be the trend, where the extremely large language models are primarily going to be used for maybe media type entertainment application and consumer application. Companies are looking for smaller, easier to host, manageable model that they can put behind their own firewall. So you can prevent things like PII leakage. You can monitor its output to make sure that there's safeguard against hateful speeches and so on. So that is the reality. And it's going to be deployed across a hybrid environment. Everything from edge devices to servers to different areas, because data lives in different areas, in different parts of the hybrid cloud. Algorithm is going to have to need to go there. Governance is going to be top priority because of all the risks that I've highlighted. To make ROI, you need to be able to scale it. Otherwise, you buy a lot of hardware for very little use case. But choosing the right use case is important. And then, of course, at the end, garbage in, garbage out is still true. If you fine-tune a large language model with garbage, you're going to get garbage back. So all that stuff is still true. I'm running over by quite a lot, so I'm going to go quickly. Key things that we need to do is actually have governance change in organizational culture. We're helping customers with our AI ethics board, and we're also building in governance by injecting that process into the AI development workflow. So where in the past, governance is a document that sits on a shelf somewhere, maybe a box somewhere, that we rely on IT team to go and read and data science team to go and read. Let's change that. We need to inject that into their workflow so that the governance checkpoints are always in place. That's why we put this together. Now, Ray has already mentioned about watsonx and what it is. watsonx really primarily breaks down into three main components. watsonx.data handles trusted data for training, fine-tuning models. One of the 5 myths that we talked about. watsonx.ai works on building, deploying, and managing the actual model itself. Model lifecycle management, things that goes onto the hybrid cloud, has to exist in different areas. And then finally, watsonx governance is the overarching foundation piece that looks after governance of those use cases and so on. So we're actually doing risk mitigation and so forth. Now, the rest of the platform is important, but today we're just going to take a look at the governance capability in a very, very brief overview. So what can watsonx governance do for you? Well, here's some of the key things. It injects metadata and model facts collection, automate that, and puts it into the workflow. So as you're training traditional ML models, as you're fine-tuning LLM, the test information, the performance information, how well it's actually making the prediction or the generation, all of that is tracked and automatically updated into the governance system. So someone who comes along and review whether something should be deployed or not will actually see the test data used, the test results, and all the relevant information. It's not done manually, it's done as part of the automated overall model management cycle. Have to have tools to monitor everything after it's deployed. That's also built into the platform. One place to collaborate. All the approver, all the developers sits on the same platform. They click the button, things flows into the next part. Model risk and operational risk assessment. We actually integrate in open pages, another IBM product for risk management. AI model management is one of the special modules there, and that's what we base the solution around. Of course, everything we do actually ingests all the new regulation that comes in, and we update our models and our template to reflect those policies as they come in, so that you can learn about the latest. You can say, hey, I need to comply with the EU AI Act, and we'll be able to tell you what that actually means. So that's what we actually have created in watsonx.governance. Here's a big kind of workflow in terms of the deployment, development lifecycle, evaluation, testing, how that integrates back into the top part, which is the inventory management. right? You need to manage your model inventory, LLM or otherwise, but also your model risk governance. So all those little arrows are basically automatically, or the automation and the checkpoint that is automatically injected into the workflow itself. When we talk about governance, we always talk about regulation, then we talk about our obligation to those regulations. Then in financial terms, we typically talk about control. So think about taking the regulation, identifying the obligation that you have in it, then injecting all the control point in the right places so that you can operationalize the entire concept of governance as opposed to having it be a stack of paper on a bookshelf. I have already gone, I think I might actually be okay, but I actually can stop my presentation and say thank you again for listening. It's a pleasure to be here. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, for the insight and the audience. Thank